Hello and welcome to another Pauper Commander review, this time for Secrets of Strixhaven. For those who don't know, Pauper Commander is a format played with 99 commons in your deck and 1 uncommon creature in the command zone. There is no need for it to be legendary, and its color identity defines what cards are allowed to go in the rest of the deck. I always really enjoy going over the new Pauper Commanders every set because it's really interesting how the common card pool can affect how you assess a card. Some cards that look like they'd be really good on paper or would perform well in other formats just don't do much here because what they're trying to do, there's just not enough support for in the 99. I also always compare to the history of Magic, so while some cards look really cool and I still encourage you to try them if you think they look fun, there's probably a stronger option available, which is why they didn't make it onto this list. For example, Garrison Excavator looks fantastic. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, you get to create a 2/2 creature, and there's no limit on how often this ability can trigger per turn. The problem is that the original Strixhaven kind of already did it better. Quintorius, while admittedly 1 mana more, gives you another color in your color identity, makes bigger tokens, and gives all of your spirits +1/+0, which is what the tokens are. Now, if you're playing something like Clover, you can actually make Garrison Excavator your Clover, have 4 copies of it in your deck, and then still have Quintorius as your commander, having them hyper synergize with each other, while still offering you these 2 colors for your color identity, which could be really strong, but that's not what this video is about. If you are interested in looking into Clover, I did make a full format breakdown video for that, which you can find in the description. Actually comparing them side by side, I can see that it's much more of a close race, especially if you prefer monocolor decks. Garrison Excavator is probably a very good new option for you. But overall, this is the kind of thing that doesn't make the list because it has to fight for that slot so hard. With all that said, let's count down my top 10 Pauper Commanders from Secrets of Strixhaven. Number 10, Muse Seeker. Muse Seeker is a 2-mana, 1/2 blue elf wizard with Opus. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. Then, discard a card unless 5 or more mana was spent to cast that spell. Opus is an ability word which doesn't actually mean anything inherently, it just lets you look out for cards that have the when you spend 5 or more mana effect. Being able to draw and discard a card, looting through your deck whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, is incredibly powerful. And what's nice about this is that it levels up if you end up casting these bigger spells that you were trying to eventually dig into. This card is in the 10 slot largely because it has to compete with Shantado, a blue and red card that costs 1 more, has an 0/4 body, and has whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this gets +X+0, where X is the amount of mana spent on that spell. If X was 4 or more, draw a card. So while Muse Seeker draws you every time you cast something no matter what, as long as it's an instant or sorcery, Shantado only draws you if you satisfy the condition. However, her condition is 1 mana lower. Despite the competition, I think Muse Seeker is still in the conversation because of the consistency offered by being able to always loot through your deck, so you can eventually find those cards that you're really looking for. Number 9, Essenceknit Scholar. Essenceknit Scholar is a 3-mana black and green 3/1 Dryad Warlock with when this creature enters, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with whenever this token attacks, you gain 1 life. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, draw a card. This is an effect we have seen a few times, but I think this is one of the stronger versions of it, especially because it comes with a disposable body that you can use to get your first trigger. The downside of something like Essenceknit Scholar is that it is a 3/1. This does die very easily to any incidental ping or any -1/-1 effects. The best comparison is probably Warden of the Cycle, a 3/4 instead of a 3/1, and it has at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, either gain 2 life or draw a card and lose a life. Once again, we're seeing that it's a tight race against the competitor, so it stays at the 9 slot on the list. Number 8, Abstract Paintmage. Abstract Paintmage is a 3-mana, blue and red 2/2 Djinn sorcerer that reads, at the beginning of your first main phase, add blue-red. Spend this mana only to cast instant and sorcery spells. Effectively, this is a 3-mana mana dork that taps for 2, except for that you don't actually have to tap them, so you can still use them for other things if you so desire. We're seeing more mana dorks in blue and red, and we even have another blue-red mana dork that can be your commander in the form of Emperor of Palamecia. That card has a lot of other things going on that makes it really strong, but if we're only looking at it from the perspective of a mana dork, it's producing 1 mana instead of 2, and in these colors, ramping 2 mana is a big deal. Being able to ramp into these big splashy effects that you otherwise might not have access to until much later in the game. Number 7, Thunderdrum Soloist. Thunderdrum Soloist is a 2-mana 1/3 red dwarf bard. It has reach and opus. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. If 5 or more mana was spent to cast that spell, this creature deals 3 damage to each opponent instead. This is an effect that often gets pretty high placement on my lists. It's just generally very strong to be able to constantly cast spells and kill your opponents sort of incidentally. While this is the part of the list where we're starting to see stronger cards, it's not even higher because there's just a lot of competition for this sort of effect. Gutter Snipe, for example, is a 3-mana creature that pings for 2 whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, no matter how big it is. But most of these effects still only ping 1 damage no matter what, so I think this upside of being able to deal 3 damage really is going to add up to a lot of value. While you might think you don't want to spend 5 mana on all of your spells, it's sort of a weird form of card advantage. Normally, you're going to be casting these small spells that don't cost that much, but they draw a card, so they replace themselves in your hand. But there's not that many in red that are actually worth playing, and so you end up in this weird situation where you're probably spending 2 or 3 mana on your spells anyway. So at that point, by the time you've spent 5 mana, you would have not actually done more than 3 damage. But you're down that many cards in hand. Being able to spend 5 mana and ping 3, only going down 1 card in hand, is actually a pretty big benefit to be able to continue into the late game. The other benefit, of course, of these big spells is that they're actually big spells with big effects, and they're not just spinning your wheels for the sake of damage. Number 6. Mica, Reader of Ruins. Mica, Reader of Ruins is a 4-mana, 4/4 red human artificer. They have Ward, pay 3 life, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may sacrifice an artifact. If you do, copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. This is one of those cards I feel like I haven't really figured out what the best game plan for is yet, but it's just one of the most interesting effects of the entire set, and there's gotta be something good you can do. While in common, there aren't as amazing things to copy, there are some very powerful value pieces that will get you continuously moving. The most obvious spells to combine with Mica are things like Unexpected Windfall and Big Score, which have an additional cost for the original that you don't have to pay for the copy. And they're just drawing you into more resources and generating more artifacts that you can sacrifice to copy future spells. This is the kind of card that maybe has combo potential that I haven't seen, but even if it doesn't, has incredibly strong value potential. As for the overall game plan and win con, it's not going to be putting you in a specific box. There's a lot of different directions you can go with Mica, and it's going to create for some really interesting decks. Number 5, Sanar, Unfinished Genius. Sanar, Unfinished Genius is a 2-mana 0/4 blue and red goblin sorcerer. Sanar enters prepared and has tap, create a treasure token, activate only if you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. Their prepared spell is Wild Idea, a 5-mana sorcery that says search your library for an instant or sorcery card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Being prepared is a status that a card can be in this new set, which just means while prepared you can cast a copy of their prepared spell, which then makes them unprepared. While Wild Idea is interesting and opens up some different lines, the real benefit of Sanar is being an 0/4 body that then can tap to make a treasure. Tapping to make a treasure is basically being a mana dork, except for that mana can stick around on future turns, and has the added benefit of any form of artifact synergy, which there is a ton of in Pauper. The stipulation for Sanar is that you have to cast an instant or sorcery spell on the same turn that you choose to activate them. This really lends themselves well to instant speed spells so that you can keep them up as a blocker through your opponent's turn, and then cast a spell on your opponent's end step and tap them to make a treasure at the end of their turn. Similarly to the abstract Paintmage, this is kind of competing with the Emperor Palamecia in that they can generate a mana every turn. The upside of being able to stockpile that mana is very interesting, but I'm really mostly interested in how they are making artifacts, which has the potential to combo with other cards. Cards like Reckless Fireleaver will ping your opponent, and if you have any form of untapper, you can continuously tap Sanar to make a treasure, and then sacrifice that treasure to pay for the untapper. I know saying combos with Freed from the Real isn't that impressive of a statement because so many things do, but it is worth mentioning. Number 4, Teacher's Pest. Teacher's Pest is a 2-mana 1/1 black and green skeleton pest. It has menace, and whenever this creature attacks, you gain 1 life, and black-green, return this card from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. In a lot of ways, this is reassembling Skeleton, but upgraded so that it has green in its color identity, menace, and gains you life whenever it attacks. Commanders that can be used as cheap sacrifice fodder that can be brought back over and over again are very strong. And the fact that this comes back multiple times a turn if you can pay the cost is especially good. Now, if you're not planning on actually going into combat with this and taking advantage of Menace or taking advantage of it gaining you life, then the only real benefit is its color identity. Adding green to the color identity gives you a lot more options to play in this space of sacrifice matters, but it is worth pointing out that there's one way in which reassembling skeletons could be considered better than Teacher's Pest. Both of these cards can infinitely combo if you get the right setup, but they're both very clunky. However, reassembling skeletons is slightly easier to combo off with because it only costs one generic and a black to be brought back instead of costing a black and a green. If you wanted to sacrifice either one of these into Ashnod's Altar and make colorless, you would have to somehow turn that mana into colored mana. For reassembling skeleton, it's as simple as using a Bog Initiate or an Ebon Hands Initiate to turn that colorless mana into black mana. When it comes to Teacher's Pest, you would have to then turn that black mana additionally into green with another combo piece. It's a lot of hoops, but played in any other situation than that one combo line, Teacher's Pest should by far exceed reassembling skeleton. Number 3, Snooping Pedh. Snooping Pedh is a 3-mana white and black 2/3 human cleric with repartee. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature, this creature can't be blocked this turn. Additionally, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and lose a life. This provides incredibly consistent damage and card draw. Using repartee, you can make sure that they're always consistently being able to be unblocked, and you could even be casting spells directly on them to make them hit even harder. Then you get to draw cards at the cost of 1 life, so that you can continuously do this every turn. Now, if you don't want to be actually using repartee every turn, you probably can get away with it by instead moving into equipments or enchantments and just giving them unblockable some other way. The repartee benefit is really nice, but super not necessary, which could let you take the deck in a completely different direction and just benefit from extremely consistent card draw in the command zone that gives you access to 2 different colors. Number 2, Emil, Vastlands Roamer. Emil, Vastlands Roamer is a 3-mana 3/3 green elf druid with creatures you control with a +1/+1 counter on them have trample. They additionally have 5 mana, 1 of which green, tap, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of differently named lands you control. Going over this one point at a time, that first ability is something we have seen on other cards before. It's just a very consistent way of making sure that when you grow your board, they can actually get damage through. If you only compared this card on that axis to other options, it is about the same as everything else, not exceptionally better or worse. Some of them come with trample themselves, some of them can give themselves +1/+1 counters, but all in all, it's basically the same effect as far as it affects the rest of the board at the same cost. The real upside of Emil is the ability to spend 5 mana and tap them to create a 0/0 with X counters on it. What I like so much about this is that this is not sorcery speed. You can have 5 untapped lands and pass the turn, holding up all of the interaction to keep Emil alive if you need to, and if you don't need to, you have the mana sink that makes this fractal. So it's never really costing you mana to wait around for later. I think the ability to just have your hand be reactive in mono green is very cool, and being able to make sure you are constantly making sizable threats with trample as long as Emil's around. Again, this is not making an XX, it's making a 0/0 with X +1/+1 counters, so they are inherently getting Emil's benefit. The real question is, how consistently can X be a large number? Can you actually fill your deck with differently named lands? And I think generally speaking, you'll find it not too difficult. There's certainly enough options if you just wanted to put anything in your deck. The question becomes, how good are they? Most of them are going to come into play tapped or make colorless mana, and while you really are going to want to be making green mana, you don't need all of your mana to be green, making the cost of differently named lands not too impactful. It's worth pointing out for sure, but I don't think it's a deal breaker for Emil. Before going to the number 1 pick, here are some honorable mentions. Cuboid Colony. This card, I think a lot of people are really excited for, and I just don't see it. It has flash, it has flying, it has trample, and that's all great, but it's growing incredibly slowly. Maybe that's just enough, and you're going to be able to make it bigger yourself with the spells you're casting, but the Increment ability that makes it get 1 counter larger every time you spend more mana on a spell than its current power or toughness is just not going to add up to that many counters. Colossus of the Blood Age looks really sweet. It's a 6-mana 6/6 that burns your opponents for 3 and gains you 3 life when it enters, and then when it dies, it lets you discard your hand and draw that many cards +1, so it's not just rummaging through your deck, it's actually netting you an additional card, but that's still just a one-time effect on a 6-mana card that doesn't feel super impactful. Topiary Lecturer is a card that taps for green equal to its power. This is an effect we've seen a decent number of times, and that means there's a lot of things competing for its spot. Comedy of Whispered Hopes is still probably number one because it has the ability of when you put one or more +1/+1 counters on something, you put that many +1 counters on it instead, so it grows incredibly quickly. Topiary Lecturer has the benefit of it having Increment, which lets it grow naturally on its own without needing outside investment from your other cards. I still think there's sort of a max limit on what Increment's going to practically do, but that might just be enough mana that it doesn't matter at that point. You don't need it to be tapping for 10. It could just be tapping for 3 or 4, and Topiary Lecturer might get there faster than Comedy of Whispered Hopes would. For Necroscribe, I saw so many people excited for this, but at the end of the day, it is a 6 mana 5/4 that admittedly has Ward, but that Ward is discarding a card, not something that's that hard to do. The ability of being able to reanimate anything from your graveyard for the cost of casting a single instant or sorcery spell is absurd and could really go off if you can stick this card, but how are you practically doing that? Are you waiting until you have 7 mana and then trying to protect it, or 7 mana and try and get 1 use out of it before it dies? It just feels super awkward, whereas a suite of reanimate spells might just do it better. And with all that said, my number one pick for Pauper Commander from Secrets of Strixhaven is Scolding Administrator. Scolding Administrator is a 2 mana 2/2 black and white dwarf cleric. It has Menace and Repartee. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. When this creature dies, if it had counters on it, put those counters on up to 1 target creature. This card comes down on turn 2, and as long as you're casting spells targeting creatures, not even limited to once per turn, it is going to grow. And it has Menace, so it's going to either be getting in damage or taking 2 things down whenever it attacks. One of the big benefits of Repartee is that it doesn't say when you cast an instant or sorcery spell on a creature you control. It just has to target any creature. So you can fill your deck with removal to just completely control the board while growing your Scolding Administrator. As long as you have a few tokens or other incidental creatures lying around, if they do target down your commander, you get to hand those counters over to somebody else, so you don't even lose that much value in the process. The only real risk for an effect like this is if they wipe your entire board at once and you have no creature to hand the counters off to. But there's so few sweepers in this format that I don't think it should be an issue at all. But if someone's hitting you with -1/-1 or damage-based sweepers, it's not going to be enough to actually deal with Scolding Administrator when they're at a size that actually matters. This is a white-black Voltron threat that doesn't ask you to spend all your time buffing them up, but instead lets you spend the card slots in your deck to control the board so that you can consistently get in damage and take people out. And that brings us to the end of my Secrets of Strixhaven Pauper Commander review. Secrets of Strixhaven looks absolutely fantastic. I think they nailed the flavor on this set, and the cards look absolutely incredible. Thank you for watching. I've been DarcyBits. This has been the top 10 Pauper Commanders from Secrets of Strixhaven. I'll see you next time.